go check my last previous video out from Saturday. I dropped Mr. Ball. That was a crazy video. Previously with the five videos I dropped too, man. Let's go ahead and get this disturbing video started. Hopefully y'all having a good Monday.
Leaving the victim's mother saying the following: "The way the police handled this whole case sickens me, and I have been fighting for the truth. This is the case of Lee. Lee was born on the 24th of July 1975. Her life wasn't easy from the start. Her parents split up when she was around 7. Due to this happening so early in her life and during her formative years, the separation was tough on her, as you can imagine. She spent a couple of years living with her grandparents. After the split of her parents, Lee moved back in with her mother, who had met a new man. By 1989, Lee was living in a small coastal town called Fern Bay with her mother, stepfather Brad, and her little sister. Fern Bay is located just north of Stockton in New South Wales. It was a quiet coastal suburb during the late 1980s. The area wasn't known to be unsafe. However, violent crime was increasing. Various attacks were on the rise. In the mid-80s, there were around 1,800 violent crimes annually. And by the mid-80s, it had risen to 3,700. In 1989, Lee was 14. She was in year 8 at school and had a good number of friends. She loved animals and dreamed of becoming a vet one day. She spent most of her weekends and holidays with her grandmother, who lived in Killabin Bay. According to those who knew her, that is where Lee felt most at home. People who knew Lee described her as a kind, typical teenage girl who was just beginning to figure herself out. She was also beginning to get to an age where she was being invited to parties where alcohol would be consumed. On the 3rd of November 1989, Lee was invited to a birthday beach party. This event was to celebrate the 16th birthday of a boy from the local area. The party was held at the North Stockton Surf Club. Around 50 to 60 teenagers made their way to the venue that night, most of whom were in year 10 at Newcastle High School. Lee was at least familiar with most of the people who were present. That night, she got dressed and made her way there with some...
I started partying when I was like 13, 14. I started partying at a young age. That's why I'm partying now. I'm in my 20s, my 25, I'm 25. That's why partying so boring to me now. I ain't gonna lie, they play the same music every time. Like,
friends.
It's so boring, bro.
Lee arrived at the party at around 7:30 p.m. Her mother had given her permission to attend, but had also arranged to pick her up later that night at around 11 p.m. Lee's mother was under the impression that the party would be supervised by adults, but this was not the case. The party was, for the most part, unsupervised. There were 2 older boys in attendance, Matthew Webster and Guy Wilson. Both were 18. These 2 were acting as unofficial bouncers. They were tasked with the job of marking guests' hands to confirm their entry. Of course, it doesn't really need to be said that they were not qualified to actually do this job. And this is where things become rather disturbing. One theory in this case is that the older boys at the party planned to get a number of the young girls drunk and have their way with them. Several witnesses later told the police that Matthew Webster had boasted that he and others planned to get Lee and other girls drunk, and all of them would, quote, go through them. Almost every single person in attendance was under the legal drinking age, but many of the attendees consumed alcohol and marijuana. This lack of supervision and the presence of these substances set the stage for the chaotic events that unfolded. Inside the event, a band was performing. The mood was lively to say the least. Due to the immaturity of the guests and the heavy drinking, the party became out of control with fights and inappropriate behavior as the night progressed. Lee herself became rather intoxicated early in the evening. She was given copious amounts of whiskey and Coca-Cola. Those who were present at the event would later tell the investigators that she seemed to be visibly affected by the alcohol. Apparently, she was stumbling and was in a vulnerable state. Some even say,
I hate guys like that. They be so weak, bro. Can't get in there, so they gotta...
that she struggled to stand up without any assistance.
Just go gay.
In this vulnerable state, something truly horrifying happened to Lee, and things took a despicable turn. Now, the exact details of what happened remain unclear to this day. At some point during the night, one of two things happened. Lee was either led away from the party, or she was coerced away from the party to a secluded area.
I just seen like these past 2 days, I was talking about it and did a video on the Kanika Jenkins case. You know what I'm saying? That happened a couple years in Chicago. About the girl that father Ben Shaw and Jack the Ripper. They found out who Jack the Ripper really was. I was talking about it and did no video on this. You know, it's crazy.
In the nearby sand dunes. Either way, she was taken away from the party with sinister intentions. They wanted her somewhere where nobody would see. This person is unnamed, but they were 15 years old. After reaching the sand dunes, this 15-year-old essayed Lee. There is some dispute about how consensual this was. Some have tried to claim that this was consensual. However, Lee was 14 and she was incredibly drunk, to the point that she even struggled to stand up. She was essayed. Once this was over, Lee returned to the party in a frantic state. She was deeply worried. She was scared that she might be pregnant. Those who saw Lee when she returned later said that she was visibly upset and that there was blood on her pants in between her legs. Lee was moaning and crying. At one point she fell on the ground and was in a lot of pain. She then shouted out the name of this boy who had taken her to the sand dunes. However, news spread around the party that Lee had had intercourse with this boy. Some took this as a sign that they may have a chance at sleeping with her too. Guy Wilson attempted to ask Lee if she would be interested in sleeping with him too, but Lee rejected his advances. A group of young boys then began tormenting Lee. The older boys, Matthew Webster and Guy Wilson, along with other younger boys who can't be named for legal reasons, surrounded her and threw her to the ground. The group then proceeded to kick her around with their feet.
I ain't gonna lie, when I was 14, like when I was 15, 16, 17 mostly, but I was fucking grown with women. I ain't gonna lie to y'all, I was fucking grown.
They spat at her and poured beer on her head. A number of them then accused her of being a whore. According to those there were lots of people watching, and they did nothing to help. They just stood and laughed. As Lee got up and ran away, one of the boys threw a glass bottle at her. Lee was seen by several witnesses leaving the club, heading towards the beach at around 10:30 p.m. that night. As she was leaving, Matthew Webber spotted Lee, and he decided to follow her. Lee walked alone into the sand dunes. Matthew was closely behind. It isn't clear if Matthew was alone or not, even to this day. But anyway, what we know is that Matthew followed. He saw the opportunity to do the unthinkable. Once in the sand dunes, Matthew brutally attacked Lee in the isolated area. The specific sequence of events was pieced together from forensic evidence, along with Matthew's confession that was obtained in a later interview. What happened next to Lee ranks amongst one of the most horrific acts I have ever covered on this channel. As I mentioned, it is unclear if Matthew acted alone, but allegedly, Matthew, possibly along with others, pinned Lee down to the ground and forced themselves upon her. It's understandable that Lee may have tried to call out for help, and so Matthew grabbed some sand and forced it into her mouth. This act may also reflect further dehumanization that Lee experienced during the multiple attacks she faced. If this wasn't already enough, a broken beer bottle was inserted into Lee's genitals. This, of course, caused extreme pain and damage to her body. The forensic details of Lee's case paint a harrowing picture of the violence she endured in her final moments. Matthew and the others who were possibly there likely realized what they had done. Matthew knew that if Lee lived, she would inform the police and tell them who did this to her, and his life could be forever ruined. Matthew looked around the sand dunes, and as he scoured the scene, he spotted something. a large rock. This rock weighed 5.6 kilograms, or around 12 pounds. It was incredibly large
this
and
story
blunt.
is fucking crazy.
As Lee lay in the sand in
God,
extreme
bro.
pain, Matthew retrieved the
This
rock.
story is crazy.
He then stood over Lee and raised the rock above his head.
That's fucking diabolical.
He swung down over and over
I ain't
again.
gonna lie to you.
He hit Lee's head with such force that her skull
I'm not gonna lie
cracked.
to you.
The extent of her injuries was so severe that brain tissue was exposed due to the force of the blows. Upon killing Lee, Matthew dropped the rock and fled from the scene. The scene he left behind was incredibly gruesome, with blood spatters reaching 2.8 meters away from Lee's body.
Damn it, man.
Meanwhile,
God
11
damn,
p.m.
man.
was quickly approaching, and
story
Lee's mother and stepfather
shit blowing me
made
now,
their
ain't gonna
way
lie.
to pick her up. They arrived at the venue, but they couldn't see Lee anywhere. The two searched for her in the general area, but she was nowhere to be seen. They simply assumed that Lee might have gone to a friend's house for the night, so her mother and stepfather
so.
decided to return home
Fuck,
and wait
man.
for her there. But of course, Lee did not come back. The morning after, her stepfather resumed the search. As he walked through the sand dunes, less than 100 meters away from where the party was held, he found her.
Oh, God.
As you can imagine, the sight was incredibly distressing. He immediately called the emergency services, and an investigation began. A crime scene was established, and Lee's remains were taken away for an autopsy. Lee's cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. As I mentioned, her skull was severely fractured, and she had extreme damage to the brain, with brain tissue being exposed. However, the investigators found something truly odd. The strikes with the rock, which ultimately killed Lee, came from multiple directions, meaning that more than one person was likely responsible. Lee also suffered significant internal trauma to her ribs, liver, and kidneys. These injuries suggest that she was subjected to repeated forceful blows. Signs of asphyxiation hemorrhages were found, indicating that strangulation or compression of her neck may have occurred during the attack. Lee also suffered horrific injuries to her privates, including tearing and internal bleeding. The injuries pointed to the use of a broken beer bottle. Sand was also discovered in her mouth and her airways, forcibly inserted during the attack. Lee was also partially undressed. Bloodstains were found spread across a wide area.
Oh, this motherfucker get the same. I hope he got the same treatment. Oh, 10 times worse. And I'm dropping another video on my second channel. I might be a music video today.
Indicating an extremely violent struggle. Reports indicated that more than one person was responsible. The media soon picked up on this story, and various factors caught the public's attention. Lee's unique name, her young age, and of course, the extreme violence that was used in the murder. The police got to work to find whoever was responsible. This was an incredibly lengthy process. First, the police needed to piece together what exactly had happened. The area was closed off, and forensic examinations were conducted to collect the evidence. Approximately 150 people were questioned during the investigation.
Hey, bro.
The investigation was littered with rumors.
When I was 18, 17, 18, I wasn't hanging with no 14-year-olds. No 15-year-olds. You know what I'm saying? Unless you my family. It's kind of weird. But okay. When I was 18, bro, I ain't gonna lie. I was talking to 30. I was talking to my mom age.
False information and allegedly poor recollections. The results were noted, quote, chilling silence from the parents of other teenagers at the party, which impeded information gathering. The local community's reluctance to come forward with information created challenges for the investigators seeking to piece together the events leading up to Lee's death. Many of the party attendees were underage teenagers who may have withheld information to avoid implicating themselves or their friends. This silence was compounded by the parents of these teenagers, who appeared to discourage open cooperation with the police. The parents likely feared that their children would face legal consequences for their involvement in underage drinking or drug use, or if they took part in the harassment of Lee. Some witnesses later admitted to giving false information, further complicating the investigation. Some of the teenagers' parents may have even pressured others in the community to remain silent. All of this meant that key individuals who may have been involved in or witnessed significant events were never fully held accountable. When it came to questioning, detectives targeted the males from the party. Several potential suspects were asked for blood samples. They were also asked to give the police the clothing they wore on the night of the murder. Matthew Webster was one such suspect. Officers then took the cameras that were used on the night and looked through all of the film. They wanted to check if any of the suspects had given them different clothing. While looking through the photographs, they found an image of Matthew and they checked his clothing. Matthew Webster had given them a different set of clothing. This set the alarm bells off in the police's mind. Witnesses reported seeing Matthew follow Lee into the dunes after she had left the party. And so, Matthew was grilled about his involvement that night, 3 months after the murder. When the police spoke to him, he could not provide a credible explanation for his whereabouts during the time that Lee was murdered. Matthew initially denied any involvement, but the pressure mounted after evidence was presented to him. The police continued questioning him until the pressure became too much, and he eventually cracked, confessing to killing her. His confession provided chilling details about the events leading up to her death. Matthew claimed that he saw Lee walking across the grass towards the end of the car park of the venue. He claimed to have yelled out to her, "Lee, don't go down there," but that she turned around and told him to F off and leave her alone. He followed and saw Lee sitting down on the grass. He walked up to her and claimed to speak to her. He said that he went with the intention of forcing himself upon her, but Matthew claimed that the two walked down to the bushes and he began to take her clothes off. He told the police that the two were about to engage in consensual intercourse, but that she started pushing him away and saying, I don't want to." Matthew said that he lost his temper and he just did what he did. Matthew said he grabbed her throat and choked.
In the female, they could just say, hold on right quick. I'm getting off with the quickness. Don't give a fuck. Any female that ever had sex, we can tell you, like, I had one female tell me, "Damn, you got a fast as fuck." Oh yeah, I don't play like that. Like, some guys are weird, and at this age, I wouldn't never just get some R.I.P.
before grabbing the rock and killing her. Following this confession, Matthew was arrested and charged with the murder. Although Matthew never confessed to actually essaying Lee with the broken bottle, and the police never bothered to ask him if he acted alone. If Matthew didn't do this to her, then who did? Was anyone else involved? If so, then how many people were? During the investigation, the 15-year-old I mentioned earlier was also arrested. Specific details about the legal proceedings and outcomes for this individual are limited due to his age at the time of the offence. He was initially sentenced to 6 months in a juvenile detention centre after pleading guilty. However, there was an appeal. The court reasoned that there was insufficient evidence to prove the SA, and so the sentence was reduced to 100 hours of community service. As the investigation progressed, more attention turned to the other 18-year-old, Guy Wilson. Guy admitted to pushing Lee, pouring beer over her head, spitting on her, and attempting to throw a beer bottle at her during the party. He was released on bail pending sentencing. During this time, Guy allegedly made a threatening remark about Lee's younger sister. Lee's stepfather, Brad, heard about this, and he confronted Guy and attacked him. The exact details of the attack were not widely reported, but it was significant enough for legal action to be taken against the stepdad. In and turbulent time, Guy Wilson pleaded guilty to the attack charges. He was only sentenced to 100 hours of community service.
What the fuck?
Matthew Webster pleaded guilty to Lee's murder before the trial officially began, which meant there was no full courtroom trial, but his guilty plea avoided the need for a prolonged and detailed legal proceeding. But there was still the lingering issue. He denied participating in the earlier essay with a glass bottle, which caused Lee significant genital injuries and trauma. So, was someone else involved? Well, we will never truly know. There were some witnesses who came forward during the investigation who plainly stated that they saw Matthew and Guy leave the surf club together, and the 15-year-old who initially forced himself upon Lee, along with Guy Wilson, had no credible alibi regarding their movements around the time of Lee's death. This was allegedly never pursued any further. So forensic evidence at the scene and witness accounts implicated multiple people in the events leading to the assault and murder, and Matthew was never held accountable for the SA. But because the legal proceedings only focused on the murder charges, the SA remained unaddressed, allowing Matthew and others of the party to escape accountability for this part of the crime. This has contributed to some doubts and concerns about the full truth of what happened that night. If others truly were involved, this is a serious miscarriage of justice. Many believe that Matthew's confession was incomplete. Matthew was and is the only recognized killer of Lee and was sentenced to 20 years in prison with a minimum term of 14 years. Following this, the police faced scrutiny. There were concerns about how the evidence was collected and handled, particularly regarding the investigation. A number of suspects, including Matthew Weber, claimed to have been beaten by the officers. They also faced criticism for not pursuing the other possible killers. They also faced criticism as it took the police 3 months to charge Matthew with the murder, even though they knew that he had lied about his whereabouts early on into the investigation.
And what he wore.
The family of Lee are also incredibly unhappy about the relatively few convictions. Multiple people attacked Lee that night, but hardly anyone faced justice. Matthew was later released in June of 2004.
Damn, I thought, damn, I'm tripping. That's Lee. That's the female. I thought they attacked him. I'm tripping.
After serving has led them to advocate for more comprehensive investigations into cases of SA and murder, hoping to prevent other families from suffering the same traumatic aftermath. As of right now, no other person has been found guilty of the horrific acts inflicted upon Lee.
R.I.P. Lee, man. This was a sick case that I wish she could have got better justice on, man. R.I.P. This story really creeped me out. I ain't gonna lie to you. It really made me mad. That being said, I'm gonna do another video on my second channel, so make sure y'all go check in the description down below. I'm gonna comment and drop, you know what I'm saying, comment, and for y'all could just go directly to the channel and subscribe. You know what I'm saying? I'll be dropping videos, music videos on that every week, so make sure y'all go subscribe. See you over there. See y'all. Love y'all. Let's ride, man.